Friends and enemies, welcome back. CBP, Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast. Just me tonight with friend of the show, guest, and IRL friend, Mark Jeftovic. You guys know him, the bomb thrower, sponsor of the program. Has been a friend to Len and I for quite some time now. He's been doing a lot of writing, a lot of thinking, a lot of probably internal monologuing, we'll find out tonight, about the state of affairs in Bitcoin, state of affairs in politics, probably the state of affairs in Canada, and maybe the state of affairs in the next 10 or 12 years. I'm sure that we've all been thinking about that. It'll be good to get Mark's thoughts. It's been a while since he's been on. I think the last time he appeared on CBP was right here in this room about 9 months ago. A lot has changed in 9 months. I've had a couple of interesting debates, a presidential campaign gone awry, among other things. So we'll talk about all that tonight. But first, as always, the sponsors. Mark is actually the first sponsor. I didn't think about that. I should have let him do the read. But EasyDNS is the friendly neighborhood registrar. You can get all your domain hosting there. You can get all your email stuff done there when you get a domain. Actually, I'm looking for a domain for a Substack I'm starting called the End of Fiat. I have to think of a suffix for the domain. Maybe .xyz, maybe .io, maybe .cash. I don't know. I got to think about it. But I'm going to do it through Mark when I do it. And the reason I'm doing that is because 1, it's easy. 2, it's the most cost-efficient way to get a domain. And 3, it's just a great service. You know, we use the EasyDNS platform along with like their easy WordPress stuff for CanadianBitcoiners.com, where there's a new blog today that I wrote this morning on my second coffee, I think before 7:30 a.m., on just the absolute gong show of a debate last night and the sort of fall of the legacy media and the presidential debate as a medium. So go check that out. And if you want to start something, maybe you're looking for some Bitcoin stuff, virtual private server stuff available with Mark as well. You want to do a node, you want to do Nostr Relay, all that stuff, BTC Pay Server. He can help you with it. I know he can help you with it because 1, he uses it, and 2, he offers it. So go over easydns.com. CBP Media is the code. You get half off your first round of buys, which is unbeatable. Second sponsor, Bull Bitcoin. You guys know him. You love him. Francis and the team. The best Bitcoin exchange on the planet. Why? A few reasons. Easy ones, really. Bitcoin only. Extremists on staff there, okay, in the best way. Probably a hair shy of being stopped in the airport, but a good football field past being the weirdest guy at a barbecue, which is great. It's exactly where you want to be as a Bitcoiner. Trust me, I think a bunch of us are probably there, myself included. So those guys are great. You can buy there. It's non-custodial. Don't have to worry about getting rugged. Send it right to your wallet. It's all batched and privacy features are attached to each transaction, which you got to love. And then if you want to live on the Bitcoin standard, you can do that too. They have bills as a platform there. It's not just buying gift cards, which you can do, but it's also stuff like paying your mortgage, paying your taxes, all the stuff we hate in Bitcoin. You can do it there with your Bitcoin. Now, there's tax implications, as Len likes to say. I'm not going to say there's not. I'm not going to say there is, but I will say that in your jurisdiction, you should find out before you spend your Bitcoin what the requirements are. Go to bullbitcoin.com, use the code. It's in the link. Most of you guys are already signed up, but just in case you're not, go there for $21. All you have to do is sign up and start buying, which is great. You can't beat that. Who doesn't want $20 free? $20 will probably get you from here to the gas station where you can spend $200 on a tank of gas, which is nice. And then the third sponsor, our newest friends here at Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast, Decentral Tech. Decentral Tech is wife-friendly mining, as I like to say. We have like a 95% male audience. If you're one of the females, it's husband or no coiner friendly mining. I don't know. You can go there and get the world famous BitAxe, soon to be offered with CBP branding. There's a limited run of 75. I think a bunch of them are going to be spoken for real fast, if not all of them. But keep an eye on my Twitter feed, Len's Twitter feed, and of course, the CBP Discord, where Jonathan from Decentral Tech is keeping us updated on the latest and greatest in the CBP branded BitAxe. But on top of that, if you have a S21 or you have one of these other, sort of industrial heavier duty miners, Jonathan, the boys can help you get that thing up and running. They can repair for you. They can sell you parts. They can sell you an apparatus in which you can put a miner to heat your home or make it look cool. The possibilities around this in Bitcoin mining. But I know one thing, we have to decentralize away from all these industrial mining setups, all the publicly traded miners. There was a time and a place for these things when we were coming up. We may still be coming up in some regard, but I think that now is the time to get more miners back in the homes of the plebs, which is what we're trying to do and why we're partnering with Decentral. No promo code, no nothing. Go there, buy a miner, tell them we sent you if they ask. I don't even know if they ask. and do your part, man. If you haven't seen a BitAxe yet, by the way, it's got to be one of the slickest things in Bitcoin. I have some slick Bitcoin gadgets like the Q, the cold card, block clock. I'm naming a lot of CoinKite products there. They're not a sponsor of the show, but maybe someday if we can work something out. But the BitAxe, man, I think that one is going to take the cake, honestly. And I'm planning on getting a few. Don't tell my wife. I'll let you guys know how that goes. So Mark is not in his chair right now. Oh, there he is. He just sat back down. Good timing there, bomb thrower. You just leave for the ads, come right back. That's outstanding. People probably do that when they listen to the show. They walk out of the room for the ads and then come back and sit down. What's going on, man? First of all, I should thank you because as I mentioned on Monday's show to everyone who's listening and watching, we had a cancellation. Mike Campbell took a fall, needed some surgeries, a little dinged up, couldn't do the show. So thank you, Mark, for coming on. You're on mute, by the way. So make sure you unmute yourself before you start, welcoming yourself to the program.
Hey, Joey, I wasn't skipping the ads. I went to grab my BitAxe off the shelf.
It just came in. How's that thing look?
It's so cool. It like lights up in here when it's going. It is like I've got a helium miner that like I had to unplug because it makes this little buzzy sound that drives me nuts in my office. But this thing is like just runs like it's just on autopilot. You can't hear it. My only complaint is I've had it plugged in for almost a week and I haven't mined a single solo block yet. So like, what's up, man? I don't get it. But
that's pretty weird.
It's all for the cause, you know? So
what pool do you have it pointed to, or do you have it
CK pool right now? Solo, and it's called Bomb Axe. And it's like, if it just one day hits the lottery, it will go down in history. But I'm going to pick up a couple more. Just to have around,
Now I don't want to give away the gambit here, but I saw in your newsletter that you did write that your daughter Emily went away to university. Last I checked, dorm rooms don't charge you electric. So have you?
We could stick like some miners in M's dorm, who's actually I won't out her. She's in the chat right now, actually. And you can maybe she can recruit her whole floor to like just chain together a bunch of BitAxes. And
do you think this is a good idea? Listen, I don't know what universities put up with these days. It seems to me a lot less than they did 10 years ago, but I'm not sure that mining would be one of the things that they'd get upset about.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I have some GPUs that like EasyDNS has been a virtual company since 2019, but we still have this really tiny office nearby that the bookkeeper uses, and the electricity is included in the lease. So I've got like a few GPUs in there that I just kind of like run, and they mine like some shit coin, sorry to say it on the air. And then it just like, I have this this script that hits the Trade Ogre API and just flips it into Bitcoin. Right. And it's just like,
I mean, it's strong output. I have to get a miner going in here, a BitAxe specifically. I got to message Jonathan. Maybe after the show I will. But let's get into it here, Mark. We've where do I want to start? I named the episode after your recent letter came out. I think maybe a week ago now. This is probably a date on this, September 7th. So not quite a week ago. Putting the recent crypto carnage into perspective, Bitcoin's bull run is intact and ahead of schedule. Tell me a bit about this. This is, by the way, available on Bomb Thrower. It is not the paid Bitcoin Capitalist letter. This one is free of charge with some good charts, some good tweets, and your thoughts on, I guess you're not worried about the price action. I mean, I don't think a lot of Bitcoiners, like hardcore Bitcoiners, are too worried about price, but the newcomers maybe would be. So tell me a bit about this this letter you penned here.
Yeah, I guess if it's your first cycle, you're probably freaking a little bit, but you're like what, class of 2017 or 20? I can't remember. But if it's not your first rodeo, it all comes down to what happened after the halving, right? So, and in this case, what happened before the halving. So I think what threw everybody for a loop was we put 2 all-time highs before the halving, which has never sort of happened before. And everybody was convinced that, the ETFs came and that was going to be a huge catalyst. And then all-time high put 2 of them got printed before the halving. So that was going to be a huge catalyst. And we just thought it was going to be up only through the whole summer. But when you look at previous halvings, there's always been this kind of denouement after the halving, especially for the mining stocks, right? If you look at the charts, and there was never as many miners as there is today, but they just really cratered for, I don't have the exact numbers because I'm terrible with remembering numbers, but like 6 to 8 weeks to a few months, like it just goes terrible. Now we're heading into what's traditionally the strongest quarter of the year for Bitcoin. October is around the corner, and we'll see what happens. I mean, investor people are always quick to say, it's a pattern, and patterns aren't guaranteed to repeat, but there is this mathematical 4-year algo hard coded into how all this works that does create this kind of ebb and flow of supply and demand, supply shock dynamics. So it's not totally unrealistic to say we're probably going to mimic, rhyme with previous halving cycles. And then there's all these fundamental catalysts underneath it. I mean, that's just always where I kind of end up. It's like, well, do you think that the central banks of the world are going to stop printing money? I don't think they can. Do you think interest rates are going to find a market clearing rate? I don't think they can. There's too much debt. So it's that central bankers painting themselves into a corner that we all know is there and is really coming home to roost, that is always ultimately putting that floor underneath. And then the last thing I'll say about it is, on this cycle, and it's been observed by many others other than myself, is that retail isn't even in the game right now. It's all institutional. They're doing it through the ETFs, so be it. But the point is, it's all institutional so far, and there's very little retail participation in this cycle.
It's funny. I'm getting comments here from friends of mine about the things you're saying. I have a couple of follow-ups. The one that is most interesting to me is this 4-year cycle. In Bitcoin we call it the halving. In regular world, it's called the U.S. election.
Yeah, and true, eh?
Well, this is the thing that I'm curious about, and I know you mentioned to Len and I, and it's in the note here as well. And you've mentioned it before. There's a sort of widely accepted correlative relationship between Bitcoin and the S&P, specifically the NASDAQ, let's say the Qs. And a lot of people would point out that whether you think Bitcoin is the future of the monetary regime, around the world or not, right now you're high beta tech, basically. If you look at the chart, this is where you sit. Now, after presidential elections, the S&P has mixed performance. But to your point, what's traditionally always a strong quarter for the market is that first, back half of Q4 after the presidential election. And it seems to be strong for us too. Is it fair, you think, to say that the real like meteor that hits the price of Bitcoin and makes the thing move is the election and not actually the halving? Is the halving the thing that is priced in, and the election the thing that's not priced in? I've been giving this some thought. I don't have like a lot of data on it, but just looking over the last couple of days at performance, and it's not just the S&P, by the way, it's global markets too, because the US is sort of the stalwart, right? That's the pillar around which most of the global financial system operates and orbits. I don't know. Do you have a view on that? What do you say?
It's funny because I just started working on the mid-month portfolio edition of the Bitcoin Capitalist today, and the title of this month's issue is "Does It Really Matter Who Wins the U.S. Election?" Right? And in that sense, and we can go into why it doesn't matter, but the election matters, right? I think that's where we are. The elections count, but it doesn't really matter who wins it. It's just that this is happening. And so the entire world focuses on this, and everybody is working on, I hate to speak of they in these sort of euphemistic, all-catching words, but everyone's trying to keep these plates spinning in the air, and they're trying to keep the system on the rails. And there's a way that they think that happens with stability. And there's this threat of disruption that everyone's trying to avoid. And so what does that mean? It means we're going to try and goose the economy. We're going to try and bribe voters. We're going to try and do all these things that are like catalysts for Bitcoin. And the biggest one of them all is rate cuts. And that's the one thing that I've been trying to think about lately is, has that already been priced in? Right? How much of rate cuts been priced in? So now it's like the big debate is, will it be 25 basis points or 50 at the next FOMC meeting? You know, and I've been like, for backdrop, I've been saying in the letter for months now, like the rate hike cycle is over, right? Globally, it's done, right? Canada's already cutting, Bank of England cut, ECB cut. The only bank who's tried to raise rates was the JCB, trying to come off zero with a 25 basis point, and the entire economy globally shit the bed. And it was like, okay, we're never going to do that again until the economy can handle it, which I keep joking is going to be never, because the economy can't handle it. So even when they talk about, well, you know, we still have to raise at some point, that sends this speed wobble through the whole global financial system. So clearly these guys are stuck. They cannot raise. How much of this run in Bitcoin from, call it, you know, the bottom of 2022, December, early January 23 till now, was this realization? I've been calling it a slow motion pivot the whole way through. But now that they've basically said we're going to do it, how much of that is priced in? And I really don't know. I don't have an answer for it. Because I guess it's going to be, what's the tempo? What's the cadence going to be?
I hesitate to call myself smart money. Maybe you're smart money. I don't know, but I hesitate to call myself that. And I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot about and saying on Twitter, and some like significantly sized FinTwit accounts like will like the tweet once in a while. The rate cut used to be the first piece of the easing cycle, right? Once the rate cuts came, you could count on easy money because the economy would slow down. And these things have been pretty steady the last, you know, I don't know, 30 years, whatever it's been. Now, I think the smart money knows that the rate cut is actually the last ingredient to all of this. And so if you can wait out a rate cut, then you basically do anything you can to wait out a rate cut. And by the way, you kind of see that in markets, equity, real estate, or Bitcoin. Crypto broadly even, I think, is probably true as well, although I don't follow a lot of the garbage tokens. But I think Ethereum is like holding up fairly well against the US dollar. I know Bitcoin is, obviously. What I see there is the Federal Reserve specifically, since they're arguably the only bank that matters, although you did mention Japan there as well for different reasons, but let's leave that for now. They're going to cut into a sticky-ish inflation number that came out today in some of their core metrics. The S&P at a near all-time high, residential real estate, even in America, climbing quickly, gold at an all-time, like all these things. There's never been a situation like this. And so I'm admitting here that I may be missing something, but you tell me. I kind of laugh when I see the big FinTwit accounts, guys like Jim Bianco or Mike Green, or even guys like Eric Townsend, who often takes sort of a distant stance to all these things, talking about more commodity markets and equity markets. Everyone seems to laugh at the idea that this time might be different. But when I look at it, I see a lot of differences. Do you see the same differences, or am I way off base on that?
Yeah, I think with every one of these cycles, I mean, you can go back as far as you want, like 2008, you know, Raoul Paul says that was like the sort of seminal shift, like the world went into never be the same again after the 2008 policy response. You can say 2001, 2000, you can say LTCM, you can go all the way back to 1971, right? It's always been that kicking the can down the road, but at a greater order of magnitude so like each policy response cycle brings a bigger crisis next time down the road. And everybody, all the financial contrarians, you know, the people that you and I came up reading and now sort of like tweet with and whatever, we've all said it's unsustainable. But eventually, sooner, like one of my favorite quotes of all time was Douglas Casey, who said, just because something is inevitable doesn't make it imminent, right? So that was true for 50 years, right? Like, oh, you can't keep printing money, you can't keep racking up debt, but it doesn't mean that the global financial system is going to fall apart imminently. But now we're kind of imminently is closer, eventually is closer. And that's that sense of this time it's different because, I mean, we've all been astounded at how far policymakers and central banks have been able to blow up these bubbles. We've thought they can never add, you can't go from 4 trillion to 8 trillion.
You can't add a trillion in debt every 50 days.
You can't do that. Like you just can't do it. It can't keep going forever. And yet it does. It keeps going. It keeps going. It keeps going. But to your point, this time it's like like when the Fed is going into an easing cycle, when CPI is even officially at 3%, right? That's flashing bright red lights. Like the system is held together with spit and twist ties, and it's all coming unglued underneath. And they do these reverse repo things and this stuff with Fed speak that nobody understands. And something is up. And so now they're going to like start cutting rates with the stock market at all-time highs and gold at all-time highs. And really, you're really going to do that? So that just means something is up. Something can't continue. And they're basically like just pulling all the levers they can. And so, what remains to be seen after this US rate cut cycle starts is what's the QE going to look like? Right? Because there's going to be some everybody is onto the game, right? Of just doing this QE. And then there was that Nouriel Roubani, Dr.
Rubini? Yeah.
Rubini.
Yeah.
He's a no coiner and he's a shit coiner because he's got that stable coin. But he wrote that paper, he co-authored that paper saying like, this is kind of stealth QE, what the Treasury is now doing, right? Playing with the yield curve. And so they're going to come up with these other ways to do it. There's going to be yield curve control and stuff like that. And it's really just going to be like, yeah, something is up. This time is different in the sense that something is up. And even though on the surface, with the markets, the financial markets at all-time highs. But I've always said it's not the financial markets you have to look at because I don't think the central banks really care about the financial markets. It's the debt markets. When those start coming unglued, that's when it's all hands on deck.
So by debt markets, you mean like treasuries? So
bonds, credit, like all of that.
So what? I asked this yesterday, watching that debate yesterday. You and I were talking a little bit during the debate. I watched probably half of it before I just had to tap out and go to bed. But I asked myself yesterday, listening to those two clowns, who is buying U.S. debt at any term, at any rate? Like what sort of methamphetamines do you have to be on to hit the desk after watching that debate and go, I gotta load up on U.S. debt denominated in U.S. dollars. This is a country that looks stable.
Yeah, I'm buying 30-year paper right now. I wish I could go 50. Yeah.
Who is doing that? I don't know. But I guess the question I have for you then is like, what has to happen for that to stop? This is the question that all of us are asking ourselves. Is it that the currency is debased too quickly and the rate no longer matters because you just cannot outpace the debasement? Is it instability in the White House? Is it American Civil War? It seems to me like we're close to all these things. Guys like Martin Armstrong, have been saying for years, like, look, 2030, 2032, it's going to get hairy in the US, in Canada, and other places. At first I read that guy. I'm like, this guy is a bit much. People love this kind of stuff. They'll subscribe to it and they'll read it and they'll share it. Honestly, Mark, like I wouldn't bet against any of that now. Watching these guys last night and seeing what's happening here. What do you think the thing is? What is the straw that's going to break the camel's back?
It's always something no one sees coming. Like, it's going to be something, but then it just like, who would have thought a 25 basis point hike in the Bank of Japan?
It was less than that, actually. I think it was 15.
No, I think
they tried.
maybe it was, I think what it was is they were expected to do 10 basis points
Oh,
and they
okay.
did 25. So that so that delta of 15 basis points like wiped, what was the number, like $5 trillion?
It was a lot. That was a nuke everywhere you
Yeah,
looked that night. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's like, whoa. Do you remember we were having lunch on the patio near
That's
your
right.
place? And
Yeah.
we were like just watching everything. It was Sunday, so it was basically
Oh,
two things to watch:
is that not
Bitcoin and
incredible though?
Ethereum, and it was just plummeting.
Is that not incredible though, Mark? Like you and me are having lunch at the Collins or no, Thirsty Cactus in Dundas. Okay. I'm watching my net worth dwindle to zero slowly. Okay. And there's a guy playing like Oasis as poorly as Oasis has ever been played, and a bunch of people chowing down on hamburgers and chicken fingers. No one even fucking knew. No one cares. No one's paying attention. This is the thing that drives me nuts.
There's the answer to your question, Joey. Who is buying US 10-year paper? Their mutual fund advisor.
The chicken finger.
Everybody else on that patio's pension fund was buying the US paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Maybe. That's not a bad point. I mean, well, I appreciate, and honestly, I think now maybe even envy those people a little bit to just be on the patio. You know, the most difficult decision you're making as the world is collapsing is whether to dip your last dinosaur-shaped chicken nugget in the cheddar sauce or the barbecue sauce. Truly an existence worth living. And like, you know, I don't know what the memes are like on dinosaur chicken finger Twitter, but I guarantee they're not as good as Bitcoin Twitter's memes. I'll never know.
Especially
Unfortunately,
during a crash, they're like they're the best.
Yeah. I love that. You know, if you go down swinging, you're going down with your friends, which is nice. Okay, so let's get off Bitcoin. One of the other things I had listed here to talk to you about, because you are a man who lives the digital life. You know, you obviously write the Axis of Easy newsletter with a few of your colleagues there at EasyDNS, and Len and I do that show. I want to talk about what's going on in the world of digital privacy. And, you know, you and I have not spoken directly about this. I've seen kind of and gathered what some of your thoughts might be, judging by the newsletter. But, you know, tell me a bit about where you're coming down on stuff like the Durov arrest, on stuff like the new bills in Canada, like C18, C11, all these things. C63, I think, is the other one. And the general, it seems, clamps that are coming for Twitter. People in the UK talking about, you know, there is a precedent for us to arrest Elon Musk. Kamala Sutra, as I like to call her, saying that there is a way for us to shut down Twitter. He's sharing hate speech and misinformation and all these things. What do you make of all this? Is this something people should be concerned? I mean, the chicken finger enjoyers, they're not concerned. But what about like people like me and you? Should we be concerned about this? Is it just talk? Is it bark and no bite? What is it?
I mean, it's definitely concerning, right? Especially if you were not in a coma during COVID, right? And you saw what happened. Fortunately, that woke so many people up that I think it's ignited a counterculture, a counter move that will eventually overpower these initiatives, right? It's the age old centralization versus decentralization. And what I always say is the forces for centralization will not go down without a fight. Like they're not going to go down. They're going to go down swinging, but they are going to go down, right? I think we're headed for this period in life, and depending on my mood, depending on whether I'm an optimistic or a pessimistic mood, I'm somewhere between nation states as we understand them today are becoming less relevant over time.
Totally agree.
Right. And so they will do this thing, but we're sort of like going into this snow crash sovereign individual world. And that's going to be like a complete, it's going to be bizarro-verse, especially for the chicken finger crew on the patio. But it's going to be disorienting, and it's going to be like anxiety inducing, and it's going to be unstable and volatile. But there's this overall sort of directional impetus to just, you know, the rational optimist, just overall improvement in the human condition. And then in my more pessimistic days, I think we are going to have 70% of the world, 60 to 70% of the world is going to go full collectivist for a generation and a half, 2 generations. And most people are going to be living in an Ayn Rand novel, We the Living, to be specific, right? I've never seen such widespread clamoring for collectivism and communism in the West. It's the one thing I told my daughter, if she's still in the chat, she says, like, is there anything, if I ever did anything that you would be really angry at me? I said, if you came home from university a communist, that would be it, basically. Anything else is fair game. So
it's interesting. The call for collectivism, I think, is at the very least misinformed, and in the worst interpretation, sort of intentionally destabilizing. And I say that for 2 reasons. One is that I think, just Mark, a lot of people, like you mentioned, don't understand what they're asking for when they say, I want everyone to have an equal opportunity to own a home. Like, you don't understand the mechanisms that you're asking for. The levers that you're demanding are held in place against the forces of nature, against the forces of markets, in order for that to happen. That's number one. The second thing that, and sort of along the lines of more destabilizing, as you mentioned there's been, I think unintentionally, I've kind of actually taken, to your point, a view about this whole they. I try not to say they. There's been a number of actions over the last, let's say, 15 or 20 years minimum, that have led people to destitute situations. In Canada, I mean, you and I are both in Canada, Southern Ontario. There's more tents than, Algonquin Park used to see in an entire summer at basically every major park in every major Canadian city these days. And because of that, those people are no longer concerned about things in the future. They're only concerned about things in the present. And so they will always vote to support themselves in the short term, even if it guarantees their long-term demise. And that's something I've said before on the show, and I think that's a good way to put it. Now, my big concern for the next, let's say, 2 years in Canada and the United States is that there's going to be so much enthusiasm for these handouts, specifically in the US, because honestly, Mark, I think Harris is going to win over there. And I think that if she wins, there's going to be so much enthusiasm for the handouts and no regard for the future for most of that voter base, that they're going to go gangbusters. They're going to go balls to the wall and give everybody this $25,000 for homes, student loan forgiveness, student debt forgiveness, cheaper university, subsidized healthcare, subsidized education, you name it. Whatever your flavor of communism is, you name it. And you're going to see it over there. My big concern is that there's going to be no coming back from that for the States. And for us, we may go the other way in our next election, but there's no stopping some of these trains once they start going. And so I guess the natural sort of question for you is, why don't governments at least show a little finesse on the way down the toilet, instead of just pretending that giving all this money away has no impact at all? Why don't they say, look at the debt, look at the costs. There's a decision to be made here, or a slowing of these handouts that needs to happen before we can continue, destroying the currency or whatever. There seems to be no finesse in any of this stuff. Is it because the voter base just doesn't get it? Part of me thinks that. Part of me thinks that they don't care. The governments, I should say, don't care. And, the other thing I think too, and I'm kind of rambling at this point, but the other thing I think too is, like, when people say that governments are pro Bitcoin, like when I see the ETFs in the States getting a rubber stamp, even with some hesitation from the US government, I just think these things cannot exist together. These policies plus Bitcoin, these policies plus any kind of sound money. There's something going on behind the scenes. This is my pessimistic view. There's something going on behind the scenes that I don't like anymore. And it's hard for me to ignore that these things can't coexist. So I don't even have a question, but what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, first, one thing is, you always have to wait and see what a politician does versus what they say they're going to do. There's a great book I read called Fishing for Fools by a famous author. I can't remember, the name escapes me right now, but he basically said, you know, politicians will tell the public what they need to tell them to get elected, but what they will do is what they tell the donor class, right, to get the money to buy the messaging to the public. So you almost have to tune out the messaging to the public, right? And you have to focus on what they are telling the donor class, right? I mean, during the 2016 election, it was very public. Like Hillary Clinton was giving these speeches to like $10,000 a plate fundraisers, go, you know, on Wall Street, telling them like, this is what I'm going to do. Trump seized on that and said, look, it's just going to be same old, right? And he promised to drain the swamp, and he didn't. And, you know, so will she, and then Kamala is kind of looking at all this and saying, like, you've seen her shift her policies because she sort of sees which way the wind is blowing. So in terms of Bitcoin and cryptos, like, I've never seen a party sort of about face as fast as the DNC did this summer after Nashville.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And still, like, actually, when BlackRock, I mean, it's Larry Fink, and we all have our opinions on him, but let's face it, he basically said, we're going into Bitcoin, and the US government said, okay. And I always said in the newsletter, what I think happened to Fink was his high net worth investors, right? His high net worth clients said to Fink, we're going into Bitcoin, and you're either going to give us access or we're going to get access someplace else. So, you know, his favorite phrase was forcing behaviors, and I've been using that as a mantra all year long. It's like, yeah, Larry got his ass forced, right? By the market fundamentals pushing towards Bitcoin. So all of that happened. Suddenly, Kamala is a gun-owning, frack-loving redneck, right? Who's backed by Dick Cheney.
Does she have a redneck accent, or does she only alternate between like the standard Southern accent and the white politician accent? Does she have that one down? Or
I dropped off the debate after I didn't even last 3 minutes, and I just sat down in my armchair and read a book instead. But can these things coexist? Yes, they can coexist. It's my scenario for that. My mental model for that is the great bifurcation scenario, right? The monetary apartheid. This is where CBDCs are going to come in. This is like most of the population, and half of that is going to even want this, collectivist, modern monetary theory based CBDC that sort of rations their carbon footprint and limits how many burgers they can eat a month, and, you know, gives them bonus points for euthanizing their dog. And then people with actual wealth will be holding Bitcoin. And I'm sorry to say, Maxie's, like other crypto assets,
they're going to be better than dollars for sure. I think a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Who wants a declining fiat currency for anything? Really?
No, nobody does. And I think more and more people are realizing that. Like, you and me are Bitcoin guys, but I can't, I've said this before on the show, like I don't own Ethereum, but like, if you were going to own something that wasn't Bitcoin, the list of things you'd rather own before dollars is growing by the day. And, you know, it's hard to argue with that. Even in some of these cases where the tokens or the currencies or whatever are somewhat decentralized or have a foundation, like, I still trust them more than I trust the US government. I think they have the ethos exists. Maybe they'll be corrupted down the road. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm betting on being in Bitcoin, that, you know, corruption will get to them. But it's interesting that the decline of the importance of the nation state is something I think about sometimes. And I think I've made the case to you or to Len, I forget who, that I think if you really look, if you remove the military, which I know is a big caveat, which entity is more important to more people right now? Is it like Apple and the Mag 7, or is it the US government, like bureaucratic establishment? There's really no doubt. There's really no doubt who it is, right? And as these guys grow and grow, they have all your information. They control the flow of news, the flow of media. It's all going through these same channels. And the government is just trying to like move the funnel sometimes to suit their needs. But they no longer have their collar on really any of these dogs, right? They're just hoping that when they hold the treat out, the dogs come. But at some point, the dogs will realize that the treats are in the kitchen and there's as many of them as they want. And the owner giving them one at a time is no longer enough to keep them in line. I think that's the direction we're probably going.
Yeah, well, let's rewind a couple of years. So you remember Facebook, when Facebook was called Facebook?
Yeah.
And they had they were going to come out with their own cryptocurrency called Diem. And what I always used to say at the time, that sort of illustrated, that was like the emergence of a network state, right? So if you are using your Facebook ID and you're going to be on this Diem wallet, suddenly your Facebook account is more important to your day-to-day life than your US passport.
It's a great point. Yeah.
Right. So that the State Department and various government agencies rat-fucked Facebook really good. And they got the hell out of there. And then Silvergate picked up the Diem intellectual property. And then Silvergate got screwed by the anti-crypto, Liz Warren's anti-crypto army. So the nation state government kind of won that round. But I think it put the writing on the wall, right? That all you have to have is some app. And maybe Facebook was too centralized to pull it off. And so maybe the next app that pulls it off, maybe Telegram was in a position to pull it off.
They tried, right? They tried, yeah.
And so maybe there's something else out there, like, cough, Nostr, whatever, that will suddenly come up with this peer-to-peer exchange of value and decentralized identity and data storage and transmission that will suddenly be so widely accepted that that's more important to a given member of that community than their national passport is, And I was on a video call with an online notary from the States a few weeks ago, and she lived in New York State and she had never been to Canada, and I'm like, how is that even possible? The Lewis Black joke, like even drunk on a bet, you make it to Canada, right? But it's like there are people that never leave their country's borders ever.
Yeah.
Right. So then suddenly you've got this, even it's a YubiKey or a thumb drive or just a brain wallet that suddenly has this other thing that you're getting paid from some decentralized virtual company that's paying you, and you're using this other ID system that's tied into it to get on a bus or into an Uber or have food delivered. And suddenly it's like, yeah, I think the country I'm a citizen of just passed some new law, but I don't really I don't know if it impacts me. Someone will let me know. But in the meantime, I still work. I still move around. It's like it's going to be, they're never going to go away. There's long tails on these things. But when people don't know what multipolarity truly means.
No.
They just think, oh, well, suddenly China is going to be elbowing with Russia and Europe and America to be the number one country. It's like, no, that's not what multipolarity means. Multipolarity means that nation states are going to be pushing back and forth with layer ones and blockchains and DAOs and organized crime factions and religious cults that are going to have nukes. That's where we're headed,
Yeah.
Total snow crash.
I totally agree with that. I have to read Snow Crash. I meant to ask you about.
You haven't read Snow Crash?
I haven't. And the books you recommended too, Future Shock, I think, among them.
Oh,
there's 4 of them by the same author. I'm going to order them and I'm going to read them. I don't read anything. So my wife, if she hears this, will laugh. It'll be just more books to put on the shelf.
You could probably summarize Future Shock in one sentence, right? The pace of change is accelerating, and that is causing psychosis over iterative generations.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Is that on the back sleeve? This is the thing I think people. So when people talk about how, like you just mentioned there with multipolarity, people don't really understand what it means because they think about like the next step, right?
Yeah.
When you say multipolarity, they say it's another country, it's another currency, it's another whatever, like nation state group, like a BRICS or something like that, competing with NATO or whatever, right? That's what they think because that's the next step. But as you mentioned there, the pace of the change is accelerating so fast that people can't get their head around it. The psychosis they're experiencing isn't of their own making. It's that their brain can't handle that there's been no steady evolution. The curve is not linear, and we are linear thinkers, famously, the species, right? And I try and say this to people all the time. Like, I joke about being difficult to talk to at a barbecue because I just don't care to talk about all the bullshit that half my friends think is like relevant. I was at a party a couple weeks ago and we were talking a bit about the election, which I promised my wife every time we leave the house, I will not start talking about. But you know, and one of my buddies is like, yeah, did you hear RFK he's got a brain worm? I saw that he got a brain worm when he was, I just think like this person is not equipped for what's coming in the next 5 years. Because even if you're one of these people who dines at the slop trough of CNN and the legacy media for every opinion you have, even they aren't prepared to share the change with you in any way at all, favorable, unfavorable, something in between to their own causes. They just don't have the tools to help you. In fact, no one has the tools to help you. Even I don't have the tools to help these people, or you don't have the tools to help these people. The only way to be prepared is to assume that whatever is going to happen next in your mental model is going to happen faster than you think and be over before you can adjust to it fully. And people are not ready for that. The monetary thing is a big one. I think the passport thing is a big one. I worry that the big thing over the next 2 years will be, you know, we've talked about this, I think, offline and maybe when you came over last year, but the sort of like limiting travel and limiting currency swaps and limiting, you know, I think limiting on and off ramps to Bitcoin is going to be a big one because people, for all the government's faults, they know how bad they fucked this up. And they know that people are going to start seeing how bad they fucked it up. And the most obvious response is to just cage everybody. That's the thing I think I'm worried about the most.
Yeah, well, that's CBDCs. I mean, that's sort of sums up all of that. But to your point about it's happening so fast that nobody can fully adjust, even CNN, even the World Economic Forum, like nobody. That's why I really like, I kind of wince when I hear these conspiracy theories of like, they're going to do this and force you to do this. It's like, they are as behind the curve and flying by the seat of their pants as we are. And they're just trying to say, like, you know, I'm thinking about that famous clip with Klaus Schwab and Sergey Brin when Schwab is saying, like, he wasn't saying this is this demonic dictator. He was like just literally trying to keep up with how, like, he's living in a singularity full time. And he's one of the few old people who kind of understands it. And he's like, we're not going to need elections because we're going to have AI that already knows who's going to win. Now, that's a very industrial age linear extrapolation of what was going on. And nothing could be further, like, more inaccurate than that statement, right? Like, it's just, you're completely wrong, but that's not the utterance of a world domination dictator. It's the utterance of a man trying to build a moat around an industrial age fortune, right? On behalf of himself and a bunch of other like old blue blood families. It's like, this is all happening so fast. Like, this is where we're headed. How do we get a handle on it? It's like, guess what? We're not even headed there, right?
Yeah.
We're not even headed there. Like, it's just something else is going to happen, Klaus. Like, sorry. And nobody knows. Like,
I think
we live in a totally out of control world.
Don't you think the catalyst, this is the thing I think is the most likely catalyst for all this is capital gains and unrealized gains taxes becoming too cumbersome for average people.
Pitchforks and knives and
I think that's the big one. I think forces people to think about other monies and other wealth storage vehicles.
It may not be pitchforks and knives. It will be secession and it will be capital flight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to say privately, I don't know if I ever said it in a public writing during the Trump years when he was the president. I said, Donald Trump will be the penultimate president of the United States.
For people who don't know what penultimate means, second to last one.
Second to last one. So I said, whoever comes after Trump will be the last president, right, of the United States as we know it today. So that means if he gets back in, right, whoever comes after him next, if he doesn't get back in, then like Biden is the last one, right? And Kamala will be the first female, Black, Hispanic, Canadian born
Indian.
and raised president of Eastern United States. Right? And her colleague Gavin Newsom will be the president of the Western United States. And, you know, I completely forgot the governor of Florida.
It's DeSantis.
DeSantis will be the first president of the Southern Confederacy states.
You think that's possible? Like secession is like this thing I see on Twitter all the time. And, you know, the Albertan Bitcoin contingent calls for it quite frequently as well. I think some of the Quebec Bitcoin contingent calls for it. I'll have to ask the bull guys.
Wexit is a done deal, but not until after the Liberals or the NDPs or whatever like socialist amalgamation they form after the Polyev years are over comes back to power. But when that happens, Wexit is a done deal.
Let's finish with this, since I know you have an engagement following this program that's very important. The Canadian state of affairs. I am on the record. I went on the Carrazzo show a few weeks ago and said to Tom that much the way I think Harris is going to win in the States, I would not bet against the Liberals in Canada come next election. I think there's maybe one key reason for that. Times are becoming more turbulent, and in turbulent times, as I mentioned earlier, you forget about the future and just think about what's right in front of you. This is a natural response. I don't hold it against the liberal base for that, nor do I hold it against people who are on the fence and in normal circumstances would vote for a right-leaning party. I mean, they're sort of left of center anyways, the conservatives here, but they're right of the liberals and right of the NDP. I don't hold it against them. And I think that I think we both think that times are becoming more turbulent more quickly and at a more extreme level. And so that's going to change the way that this polling looks as we go into the election in 25. I think that if you look at the actions of the three parties, they all know this. Polyev very vocally all of a sudden calling for a confidence vote from the NDP, telling everyone we have to get an election now. The Liberals, on the other hand, that I think we're going to wait. You know, I think we're not going to play politics. We're going to govern, as Mel Joly said the other day. Chrysler Freeland saying that there's more good news to come, and that's what the conservatives are worried about. Now, I don't know if I would call it good news, but there's going to be a change in the circumstance for a lot of Canadians, I think, over the next, let's say, 12 months. Where do you come down on what's going on in Canada, the elections? What are your thoughts on all that?
It's a lock.
A lock? Mark, you should never use the L word in a public setting.
Conservative blowout lock. And I'll tell you why. Because when the situation is as shitty as it is now, the incumbent party always gets blown out. Like, you cannot re-up yourself after, what is it, 10 years in power by the time
he'll be 10 next year. Yeah, I think.
He'll be 10. Right? Like, it's just, people are done. Even if everything was great, he would be done. So the longer they drag this out, you've heard me, I'm calling for the Liberals to lose their party status.
Yeah, you have said that.
Yeah. NDPs are finished. Liberals are finished. The Bloc is going to be the opposition, right? The Greens are going to win more seats than the NDP. And the Conservatives are just going to have a super majority. Hopefully they don't mess it up.
You think, it's that much of a done deal.
Yeah.
Don't you have any concerns about a debate cycle or a news cycle? Clearly the media here is bent for the Liberals, which I would be too if they were signing some portion of my check.
Yeah.
what is stopping these guys from, suddenly looking like the 92 dream team, like I like to say, wearing the same jersey, all of them, and
I don't
doing
think
whatever it
Trudeau's
takes?
even going to run.
So you don't think that, but why? I don't see a guy who's interested in stepping down when I see him talk.
Trudeau at his heart is a coward. Okay. So a real leader, when the Freedom Convoy came to town, kudos to Ben in the chat, right?
Hello,
a real leader, Ben Dichter in the chat tonight, a real leader would have walked out of, Parliament Hill and sat down in the fucking snow and had a coffee with the truckers. A real leader would have done that. Trudeau pretended he had COVID and fucking hid under his mother's skirt. Okay. He is a coward. So he knows he's going to lose this next election. And he's not even going to run. He's going to step aside to spend more time with his family who's deserted him. And they're going to replace him with Mark Carney.
Do you think it's going to be Carney, after the recent announcement? Yeah.
Yeah. He's this generation's Michael Ignatieff. And he's going to get he's just going to get ground up and shit out. It's not even going to be pretty.
Well, on that note, let's wrap it up on that somber, sober, bright note. As always, Mark, a great show. Tell people where they can find out more about you, Bomb Thrower. You got some other stuff going on I put in the show notes, but the floor is all yours, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my day job is I run EasyDNS.com. So if you want to get a domain name or a web host with someone who's not going to deplatform you for your opinions, head on over. We have a coupon code, right?
CBP Media, I think, is the code that we use. Yeah.
Stunt Pope on Twitter, bombthrower.com for the free mailing list. And I got a new Substack. I'm going to use the C word. I'm sorry. It's the Crypto Hedge Report. So it's cryptohedge.substack.com. And hang on, I'm going to just briefly explain myself. Okay.
Do it.
As much to the chagrin of the Bitcoin maxis, and I tell all my readers and anyone who I'm sort of consulting with, Bitcoin is a category of one, right? There is no, Bitcoin is the dial tone and everything else is like MS-DOS and file, Excel. But normies, people outside our tent, to them, it's all cryptocurrency. Like that is the label they put around all of it. And if you try to start a conversation with them that like Bitcoin's not crypto, their eyes are not going to turn into orange lasers. They're going to glaze over and you're going to lose them. So you just have to explain to them, this is the crypto space. I prefer to call it the digital asset space, and Bitcoin is the bedrock upon which the entire space is built.
Is that that's the sell? What goes on in that letter? I haven't read that letter yet.
It's really just a subset of the Bitcoin Capitalist letter. So like the Bitcoin Capitalist is like 2 30 to 50 page reports a month, right? And it's
Bitcoin Capitalist is good. You should I know you don't want to promote the letter too much, but it's good. I don't read a lot of stuff, even the stuff I pay for. Like I pay for a few things. I don't read it all the time. I always read that letter because I think it's pretty good content.
Yeah. So, I mean, but for people, if they're just getting into the space, it might just seem like too much of a commitment for them. So I said, okay, I'm just going to set up this Substack. And it's like anything if you're a paid user on the Substack, you get like this sliver of what goes in the letter. But I try to pick out the most salient points each month of like, okay, this is what you need to know. And then the people on the main letter get like the whole portfolio of the crypto stocks and all that stuff. So.
Right. That's great. Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Shout out to Mark's daughter, M, who came to the chat today. God bless you. Damn well have better things to do than listen to your old man talk to me. So until next, everyone, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, Joey.